What if I told you an alien handed me a book that predates the Bible, and what's written inside could shatter everything the church taught you about faith? I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about a forbidden technology of love that was buried for over 2,000 years. The being who showed me this didn't quote scripture. He revealed the vibrational science behind every miracle Jesus performed and why they've kept it from you. Once you see this, there's no going back to blind belief. This will reconnect you to your divine power, but it might cost you the comfort of your old certainties. If you're ready to remember what you truly are, subscribe and hit that bell. Because what happened to Samuel Broderick in that Arizona desert will challenge every assumption you have about God, aliens, and the nature of reality itself. Now, let me tell you how a broken man fixing a crashed spacecraft discovered the living truth that churches turned into dead dogma. Samuel Broderick was 48 years old when his life stopped making sense. He lived alone at a remote maintenance station in the Arizona desert. Just him, the machines, and the heat. Day after day, the same routine. Check the equipment, replace worn cables, log the readings, repeat. The work was mechanical, mindless, and that's exactly what he needed. Because thinking meant feeling, and feeling meant remembering what he'd lost. The divorce papers had been signed 6 months earlier. His wife of 17 years was gone. She'd said he was emotionally absent, said she couldn't reach him anymore, said it felt like living with a ghost. She wasn't wrong. Samuel's father had died the year before. Cancer, fast and brutal. They'd barely had time to say the things that mattered, and some things were never said at all. So Samuel did what he knew how to do. He ran, not physically, but emotionally. He took the transfer to the desert station, a place so isolated that even cell service was unreliable, a place where he could disappear into silence. The station sat 30 miles from the nearest town, nothing but sand, rock, and endless sky. During the day, the sun turned everything white hot. At night, the temperature dropped, but the heat lingered in the metal walls, making sleep difficult. Samuel walked through the facility like a ghost among cables and dust. That's what he'd become, a ghost, going through motions without purpose. Existing without living. He used to believe in things, used to pray before meals, used to think life had meaning. But pain has a way of eroding faith. First his father, then his marriage, then his sense of self. Now, he believed in nothing. Not God, not science, not himself. The universe felt indifferent, cold, a random collection of particles moving without direction. And Samuel was just another piece of dust, blown around by forces he couldn't control. Every morning, he woke up wondering why he bothered. Every night, he lay awake, wishing he could feel something, anything, other than this hollow numbness. He'd tried talking to the company counselor once. Over a crackling video call, he'd said he was fine, just needed time. The counselor had nodded, marked some boxes, and that was that. But Samuel wasn't fine. He was drowning, slowly, quietly, in a desert where no one could hear him scream. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent his whole career fixing things, machines, systems, equipment, but he couldn't fix himself, couldn't even figure out what was broken. His toolbox was organized, his logs were perfect, his station ran flawlessly, but inside, total malfunction. He avoided mirrors, avoided his own reflection in the metal panels, because when he caught glimpses of himself, he didn't recognize the man looking back. Hollow eyes, tired face, someone who'd given up. The nights were the worst. Long, hot, empty. He'd sit outside sometimes, watching the stars. Billions of them. Ancient light from distant suns. It should have felt inspiring. Should have made him feel connected to something bigger. Instead, it made him feel smaller, more alone, more insignificant. What was the point of any of it? The work, the pain, the endless cycle of waking up and going through the motions. Samuel had stopped asking those questions out loud, stopped praying for answers, because the silence that came back was worse than not asking at all. So he just existed, one day bleeding into the next. December 2017 was ending. Another year almost gone. Another year survived, if you could call it that. He didn't expect anything to change. Didn't want anything to change, really. Change meant risk. Risk meant feeling. And he'd had enough feeling to last a lifetime. The desert became his monastery, his prison, his purgatory. and Samuel Broderick was its only inhabitant. A man who'd forgotten how to hope, who'd stopped believing in miracles, who'd convinced himself that this was it, this half-life, this emotional wasteland, this was all there was. He was wrong, because the desert was preparing something that would shatter his carefully constructed numbness, something that would force him to feel again, to question again, to believe again. But on that particular December afternoon, as he wiped sweat from his face and checked another gauge, Samuel had no idea. He just saw another sunset, another night coming, another evening of silence. The universe, however, had other plans. The power died at 11:47 p.m. 1 second, the station hummed with its usual electric rhythm. The next, complete darkness. Samuel sat up in bed, instincts kicking in before his mind caught up. Total blackout. No backup generators. No emergency lights. Nothing. That wasn't normal. The system had redundancies. Triple backups. This shouldn't be possible. He grabbed his flashlight from the nightstand, pulled on his boots, moved through the dark hallway by muscle memory, his beam cutting through absolute black. Outside, the desert was silent. Too silent. Then he heard it. A low hum. Soft, almost subsonic. He felt it in his chest before his ears registered the sound. Samuel stepped into the cool night air, flashlight sweeping the perimeter. The sky tore open with light. Not lightning, not aircraft. Something else entirely. Silent beams cut through the darkness like living blades. They moved with impossible precision. No sound, no exhaust, no explanation. The lights danced above the station, brilliant and cold, defying every law of physics Samuel understood. His rational mind tried to categorize them. Drones, military flares, ball lightning, but his body knew better. His hands trembled. His breath came short. This was something beyond his comprehension. The ground trembled, subtle, like the earth itself was holding its breath. The lights descended, graceful, deliberate, intelligent. Samuel's training said go inside, lock the doors, call for help, but his feet moved forward instead, toward the phenomenon, toward the impossible. The lights settled behind the installation, near the rocky clearing where he sometimes sat during his breaks. The hum grew louder. The air felt different, charged, dense, alive with energy. He walked slowly, flashlight beam shaking. The dust in the air caught the strange luminescence. Each particle seemed to glow from within, creating a corridor of suspended light leading him forward. Every instinct screamed danger, but something deeper pulled him on. Curiosity? Destiny? He didn't know. His heart hammered against his ribs. Sweat soaked through his shirt despite the cold. The clearing opened before him, and there it was. The craft sat among the rocks like it had always been there. Organic, seamless, not metal, something else. The surface rippled like living tissue, pulsing with soft bioluminescence. It was impossible, beautiful, terrifying. Samuel's mind reeled. This couldn't be real, couldn't be happening. He'd read about UFO sightings, dismissed them, called them delusions, misidentifications, lies. But this was here, solid, undeniable. The air around the craft shimmered like heat distortion, but the temperature was dropping. His breath came out in clouds. He took another step, then another. The silence of the desert transformed into anticipation, like the world was watching, waiting. A sudden cold cut through his sweat-soaked shirt. The hair on his neck stood up. He wasn't alone anymore. Samuel spun around, flashlight beam slashing through the dark. The being stood 3 feet away, tall, impossibly thin, skin smooth and gray like polished stone, eyes enormous, black, reflecting everything and revealing nothing. Samuel's breath stopped. His flashlight fell from numb fingers, beam pointing sideways, casting long shadows. The creature tilted its head slightly, studying him. No aggression, no fear, just recognition. Samuel tried to speak. His mouth opened. No sound came out. Then the voice arrived, not through his ears, through his mind, clear, calm, undeniable. It is time to remember. The words resonated in his skull. Not English exactly, but perfectly understood. Samuel's legs nearly gave out. This wasn't happening, couldn't be happening, but it was. The being gestured toward the craft with a long, delicate hand. The surface of the vessel pulsed brighter. A crack of light appeared, an opening that hadn't been visible before. Samuel looked at the being, at the craft, at his own shaking hands. Every cell in his body screamed that this was real, that his life had just divided into before and after this moment. The being waited, patient, expectant, and Samuel Broderick, broken, hollow, emotionally dead Samuel Broderick, felt something he hadn't felt in years. Wonder, pure, terrifying, undeniable wonder. His old life, with its comfortable numbness, was ending. Something new was beginning. Something that would change everything he thought he knew about God, the universe, and himself. The desert night held its breath, and Samuel took his first step toward the impossible. The gray stood before him like a question made flesh. Tall, maybe 6.5 feet, impossibly thin. The proportions were all wrong for anything Samuel's mind could categorize as alive, but alive it was. The skin was smooth gray, like polished stone warmed by ancient sun. Not rubber, not plastic, something organic that seemed to absorb and reflect light simultaneously. And the eyes, God, the eyes, enormous, black, completely black. No whites, no pupils, just endless depths that reflected everything. The stars, the craft, Samuel's own terrified face, while revealing nothing of what lay behind them. The being didn't blink, didn't need to, apparently. Just watched Samuel with an intensity that felt like being seen for the first time in his life. Really seen. Not the surface, not the mask. Everything. It tilted its head slightly, a gesture that felt oddly familiar, curious. Studying him the way a doctor might study a patient, or a teacher might study a student. But there was no hostility, no threat, just recognition, like it had been expecting him. Like this meeting wasn't chance but appointment. Samuel tried to speak. His mouth opened, his tongue moved, but no sound emerged. Fear had stolen his voice. Then the words came, not through his ears, through his mind. It is time to remember. The voice was neutral, neither male nor female. Not cold, but not warm either. Factual, like stating an obvious truth that Samuel had somehow forgotten. The tone carried weight, intention, purpose. Samuel's fear began to shift. Not disappearing, fear doesn't vanish when confronted with the impossible, but transforming into something else. Awe, wonder, the kind of feeling that makes you small and significant at the same time. The being raised one long arm, 3 fingers, delicate but clearly strong. It pointed past Samuel toward the rocks. Samuel turned. The craft sat there, more visible now that his eyes had adjusted. The surface pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, blues, purples, whites, moving like blood through veins. Living circuitry. It wasn't camouflaged anymore. Or maybe Samuel was finally seeing it properly. The hull looked organic. Not metal panels riveted together, but grown, seamless. Like bone or shell, but flexible. The material breathed. Actually breathed. Expanding and contracting in slow rhythm. The air around it vibrated, shimmered, like heat distortion over summer asphalt, but the night was cold. Samuel felt it in his chest, a hum that matched his heartbeat, or was his heartbeat matching it? He couldn't tell anymore. Something deep inside him, something he'd buried under years of pain and doubt, stirred. A knowing, ancient, cellular, beyond logic or reason. This was real. This being was real. This moment was real, and it mattered. Somehow, impossibly, it mattered more than anything that had happened to him before. The being took a step closer, silent, graceful, movement that seemed to flow rather than walk. Samuel should have run. Every survival instinct said flee, get help, hide. But he didn't move, couldn't move, didn't want to move, because something in those endless black eyes communicated safety, not human safety. This wasn't about being protected from harm. It was deeper than that. Soul safety. The kind that says, you are exactly where you need to be. The being's presence felt old. Not elderly, ancient. Like standing next to something that had witnessed galaxies form and die. But there was no arrogance in it. No superiority. Just patience. Infinite patience. You have been waiting, the voice said in Samuel's mind. And we have been waiting for you. The words settled into his consciousness like stones dropping into still water. Ripples spreading outward, touching memories he didn't know he had. Waiting for what? For this? For them? Samuel's rational mind scrambled for explanations. Hallucination, mental breakdown, dehydration-induced psychosis. But his body knew better. His cells knew better. This was the most real thing that had ever happened to him. The being turned back toward the craft. Not rushed, deliberate, like someone showing you their home for the first time. Samuel followed, one foot in front of the other, not deciding to walk, just walking, drawn forward by something beyond choice. As they approached, the craft's pulsing intensified. The bioluminescent patterns moved faster, blues shifting to purples, purples to whites, whites to colors Samuel didn't have names for. The air grew thicker, charged, like standing in a thunderstorm, seconds before lightning strikes. Samuel felt tears on his face. When had he started crying? He didn't know, didn't care. For the first time in years, maybe in his entire life, he felt present, fully, completely present, not thinking about the past, not worrying about the future, just here, now, in this impossible moment. The being stopped at the hull, placed one hand on the living surface. The craft responded. A ripple of light spread from the touch point, racing across the entire structure like a wave of recognition. Then the being turned back to Samuel. Those endless eyes met his. And in that moment, Samuel understood something that would change everything. This wasn't invasion, wasn't abduction, wasn't threat. This was invitation. The universe had noticed his pain, heard his silent screams in that desert monastery, seen him drowning in his own numbness, and it had sent help. Not the kind of help he'd expected. Not the kind you find in therapy or prayer groups or prescription bottles. The kind that shatters everything you think you know so you can remember what you've always been. Samuel took a breath, deeper than any breath he'd taken in years. "I'm ready," he thought, not even sure if the being could hear. The slight tilt of its head suggested it could, and it had been waiting for exactly those words. The being moved toward the craft with steps that made no sound, silent, fluid, like watching smoke drift across stone. Samuel followed, his heart hammering against his ribs. Every step felt monumental, like crossing a threshold that, once passed, couldn't be uncrossed. The being stopped near the hull's left side, raised its hand and touched the surface gently. The living material rippled under the contact, lights pulsing outward in response. Then Samuel saw it. A fissure, a crack running vertically through the organic structure, maybe 4 feet long. The edges glowed with unstable light, flickering blues and sickly yellows. Wrong colors. Pain colors. The craft was hurt. The realization hit Samuel like a physical blow. This wasn't just a machine. This was alive, conscious maybe, and it was suffering. The being turned to him. Those enormous eyes held something Samuel recognized despite their alien nature. Concern, maybe even fear. Then the images came. Fast, direct, bypassing language entirely. The craft descending through Earth's atmosphere. Something going wrong. A cascade failure. Systems dying. The desperate attempt to land before total shutdown. The impact, soft but damaging. Critical damage. No words. Just pure information downloaded directly into Samuel's consciousness. He saw it, felt it, knew it. This wasn't invasion. This was emergency landing, survival, and they needed help. His help. Samuel's mind reeled. Why me? I'm just a maintenance tech. I fix air conditioning units and backup generators. But even as the thought formed, he knew the answer. Because he was here. Because he understood systems. Because some part of him, the part that had been slowly dying in that desert, needed this as much as they did. The being gestured toward the fissure, not commanding, requesting. Please. Samuel stepped closer, extended his hand toward the glowing crack, hesitated inches from contact. I don't know if I can help with this, he said aloud. His voice sounded strange in the charged air. Small, human. You know more than you remember. The voice came into his mind. Gentle. Certain. Samuel touched the hull. The material was warm, not hot, body temperature warm, and it moved slightly under his palm, like touching skin, living skin. The sensation was overwhelming. He could feel it, feel the craft's pain, the disrupted energy flow, the damaged pathways trying to heal but unable to complete the process. It was like touching a wounded animal, and his instinct, the same instinct that had made him fix things his entire life, kicked in. He looked closer at the fissure. The edges didn't look torn. They looked disconnected, like circuits that had lost contact. Neural pathways severed. Images flashed through his mind again. This time, different. Schematics, energy flows, crystalline matrices that conducted something beyond electricity. Bioelectric networks. The craft was showing him, teaching him, adapting its systems to his understanding. He saw tools inside the fissure, not metal tools, grown tools, organic instruments that pulsed with soft light, and somehow he knew how to use them. His hands moved before his brain caught up, reaching into the crack, finding what looked like a calibration node, adjusting, realigning. The craft responded, a pulse of light, then another, like a heartbeat returning to rhythm. Samuel's training took over. Years of troubleshooting systems, finding problems, fixing connections. It was the same principle, just vastly more complex, more alive. He worked without thinking, hands moving with certainty he didn't consciously possess, reconnecting pathways, stabilizing energy flows, coaxing damaged tissue back into alignment. The being watched, patient, present, not interfering, just observing with what felt like quiet gratitude. The air around them smelled sharp, ozone, burned desert sage, something else, metallic and sweet, chemistry beyond Earth's periodic table. Time stopped meaning anything. Samuel existed only in the work, the problem, the solution. His mind quiet for the first time in years. No pain, no regret, no numbness, just presence. Pure, focused presence. The craft seemed to trust him. Each time he touched a new section, it would show him what was needed. Visual, intuitive, beyond language, communication without words, understanding without explanation. His hands moved deeper into the fissure. The material parted for him like water, then closed gently around his wrists, not trapping, supporting, guiding. He felt the craft's gratitude, actually felt it, warm, appreciative, alive. And something else happened, something unexpected. As he repaired the vessel, something in him was being repaired too. The numbness, the emptiness, the broken parts he'd carried for so long. Each connection he restored in the craft restored something in himself. Each aligned pathway aligned something in his own consciousness. He was fixing more than technology. He was fixing himself. The being seemed to know. Its presence felt closer, warmer, like a teacher watching a student finally understand the lesson. Samuel's breath came steady, calm. His hands stopped shaking. The fear dissolved into focus. This was why he was here. Not just in this moment, in this life. This was purpose, real purpose. Not maintaining machines that nobody cared about in a desert nobody visited, but connecting, helping, being part of something that mattered. The fissure began closing, slowly. The edges found each other, merged, healed. The sickly yellow light faded. Healthy blues returned. The craft's breathing, yes, breathing, deepened, steadied. Samuel withdrew his hands, stepped back, exhausted but energized, drained but filled. The being placed its hand on the now healed section. The hull pulsed bright, strong, whole. Then it turned to Samuel, and for the first time, he saw something like a smile. Not in facial expression, the features didn't change, but in presence, in energy, in the warmth that radiated from those impossible eyes. Thank you. 2 words, but they carried the weight of galaxies. Samuel nodded, couldn't speak, throat too tight with emotion he didn't understand yet. He'd just fixed an alien spacecraft. That alone was impossible. But what felt more impossible was this. For the first time since his father died, since his marriage ended, since his life fell apart, he felt useful, needed, alive. The being moved toward the craft's interior. Samuel followed, still processing what had just happened. His hands tingled. His mind buzzed with residual energy from the repair work. The gray stopped near what looked like a crystalline chamber, reached inside with those long, delicate fingers, and withdrew something that made Samuel's breath catch. An object, pulsing with soft light, hovering slightly above the being's palm. Not a book in any conventional sense. No leather binding, no paper pages. But Samuel knew instantly what it was. The knowledge arrived complete, like remembering something he'd always known. The ancestral book. It was made of light, organic light, the kind that seemed alive, aware, intelligent. The surface shifted and moved like breathing tissue. Colors flowed through it, golds, silvers, blues that had no earthly name. Pages turned themselves, except they weren't pages. They were layers of luminescence, each one containing depths that went on forever. Samuel's mind heated up just looking at it, not painfully, but like his consciousness was expanding to accommodate something too large for normal perception. The being held it forward, offering, inviting. This book existed before your written scriptures. The voice came into Samuel's mind. Before your temples, before your religions. This is the original. Samuel wanted to ask what it contained, but the being was already showing him. The book opened wider. Light spilled out. Not blinding, embracing. Wrapping around Samuel like warm water. And he saw. Not words, not text, not symbols he could read. Memories. Living memories preserved in pure light. Events recorded not as history, but as experience. The way things actually happened. Seen from inside the moment itself. He saw forms, geometric patterns that pulsed with meaning, vibrations made visible, frequencies given shape, ancient events played out before him. Not like watching a movie, like being there, feeling there. Teachers, masters, beings of pure consciousness walking among early humans, guiding, teaching, showing them what they were capable of. Each symbol in the book awakened something in Samuel, something dormant, something that had been sleeping for so long he'd forgotten it existed. The book made sounds, soft, harmonic, not exactly music, more like the memory of music, the kind of sounds that exist before sound, tones that resonated in the chest rather than the ears, like singing, ancient singing, the kind that built cathedrals and moved mountains and healed the sick. Samuel's eyes filled with tears. He didn't know why. The sounds touched something deep, something wounded, something sacred. This is not technology, the being's voice explained gently. This is consciousness itself, preserved, shared, remembered. And Samuel understood, really understood. The book wasn't storing information the way human books store words. It was storing experience, truth, the living essence of what actually happened. No interpretation, no translation, no religious filtering, just truth, pure, unfiltered, devastating in its simplicity. The light from the book reached out, touched Samuel's chest, warm, gentle, insistent, and emotions he'd buried for years surfaced. Grief for his father, pain from his divorce, the crushing loneliness of those desert nights, but also deeper things, older things, feelings from childhood, from before trauma taught him to shut down, from when he still believed the world was magical and everything meant something. Wonder, curiosity, trust, love, hope. The book was showing him who he'd been, who he still was underneath all the pain. This book is the memory you lost, the Gray said. The memory your species lost, of who you are, what you're capable of, where you came from. The visions intensified, like waves of heat rising from summer pavement. Faster, deeper, more intense. Samuel saw masters, ancient teachers walking the earth thousands of years ago. Different faces, different times, different cultures, but all connected, all part of the same lineage, all teaching the same truth in different languages. Egypt, India, Tibet, Peru, every continent, every era, beings of light taking human form, showing humans how to access their own light, how to heal with touch, how to manifest with thought, how to love without condition. The book showed him that these weren't myths, weren't legends, weren't metaphors. They were memories, actual events recorded in living light. And then one image began to solidify, rising from the others, coming forward through layers of luminescence. A face, kind eyes, presence that felt like home. Samuel's knees buckled. His breath stopped, because forming in the light before him, becoming clearer with each pulse of the book, was a figure he'd known his whole life. A face he'd seen in every church, every painting, every prayer, but not distant, not unreachable, not frozen in religious iconography. Alive, present, real. The light condensed further, features sharpening, expression emerging, and Samuel fell to his knees as the living book revealed what it had been showing him all along. Not a story, not a parable, Not a teaching, a person, a teacher, a master of consciousness who'd walked the earth 2,000 years ago. The book pulsed brighter, the harmonics intensified, and Jesus, not the religious symbol but the actual being, began to take form in the light. Samuel couldn't look away, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but witness. Everything he'd believed, everything he'd doubted, everything he'd lost faith in, it was all about to change. The light condensed into form, not gradually, not like a slow fade-in, but suddenly, completely, undeniably. Jesus stood before him, not floating, not glowing with cartoon radiance, just standing there, solid and present and impossibly real. The face was different from every painting Samuel had ever seen. Younger, Middle Eastern features accurate to his actual heritage, dark skin, kind eyes that held galaxies behind them. But it was him. Samuel knew it with cellular certainty, the way you know your own heartbeat, the way you know your own name. This was Jesus, the actual person, the teacher, the being who'd walked dusty roads 2,000 years ago, teaching something the world had spent centuries misunderstanding. Samuel fell to his knees, not deciding to, just collapsing. His legs couldn't hold him anymore. The presence was overwhelming, not in a crushing way, in the way that being fully seen is overwhelming. When someone looks at you and sees everything, all your pain, all your shame, all your beauty, all your potential, and loves it all anyway. Jesus didn't speak, didn't need to. His presence was communication enough. Serenity radiated from him like heat from the sun, but gentle heat, warming, not burning. The Gray's voice came into Samuel's mind, calm, explanatory. He is not an isolated myth, not a singular event. He was part of a lineage, a teacher among teachers, a master who came to remind humanity of what they'd forgotten. And then Samuel saw. The book showed him Jesus's life, not the sanitized version from Sunday school, not the edited highlights from religious texts, the actual events, the real moments. He saw Jesus as a child, already aware of something others couldn't see, learning from teachers who knew the old ways, the forgotten sciences of consciousness. He saw Jesus studying, traveling, learning, preparing, and then teaching, walking through villages, speaking to crowds, but not preaching dogma, demonstrating truth. Each gesture Jesus made sent out vibrations, actual vibrations, like ripples in water, like sound waves through air. But these were waves of consciousness itself. When Jesus touched someone, their energy field changed. Samuel could see it, reorganizing, brightening, healing. Not miracles in the religious sense, not supernatural acts that defied physics, natural responses to love, to focused consciousness, to someone who understood how reality actually works and used that understanding with perfect compassion. A leper approached Jesus in one vision. Samuel watched as Jesus placed hands on diseased skin. Love poured out. Not metaphorical love, actual energetic love, a frequency, a force. The leper's cells responded, reorganizing, healing, becoming whole again, because that's what love does, when it's pure, when it's unconditional, when it's wielded by someone who understands its true nature. Love isn't just emotion, it's technology, the most powerful technology in existence, and Jesus had mastered it. Samuel saw crowds gathering, hundreds of people, not just hearing words, being transformed by proximity, their energy fields syncing with his, elevating, expanding. People who'd been sick for years suddenly healed, not because of divine intervention from above, but because Jesus' presence reminded their bodies how to heal themselves. He showed them what was possible, and their consciousness, recognizing truth, responded. The light from the vision seemed to communicate directly with the universe around it. Like Jesus wasn't separate from creation, he was in conversation with it, dancing with it, co-creating with it. Samuel felt small, insignificant, a broken maintenance worker kneeling in desert dust, but he also felt seen, held, included, because Jesus' presence wasn't distant, wasn't untouchable. It was intimate, personal, like he was right there, acknowledging Samuel specifically. The vision continued. Samuel saw the crucifixion, but not the way he'd learned it. Not punishment, not blood sacrifice required by an angry God. Transition, transformation, the ultimate teaching. Jesus showing that consciousness doesn't end when the body does, that death is an illusion, that love survives everything. Samuel watched Jesus' last breath, but it wasn't an ending. It was an opening. His consciousness expanded outward, touching everyone who'd known him, everyone who'd loved him, everyone who'd learned from him. Then resurrection, but not as a body climbing out of a tomb, as expansion, as consciousness returning in a form that transcended physical limitation, showing them, proving to them, that everything he'd taught was true. You are more than your body, more than your circumstances, more than your pain. You are consciousness itself, eternal, indestructible, connected to everything. The book vibrated intensely during this revelation, harmonics rising, light pulsing faster, and Samuel understood what he was seeing, not the story religion had built, not the edited version designed to control and comfort and create institutions, the actual truth, the original teaching, the primordial message before humans filtered it through their limitations and fears. Jesus came to wake people up, to show them their own power, their own divinity, their own connection to Source, not to be worshipped, to be followed, not the person, the example. You can do what I do, Jesus had said, not worship me, not believe in me, but do what I do. Love what I love, be what I am. Tears poured down Samuel's face. His entire body shook, because he got it, finally got it. Faith wasn't about believing impossible things, it was about remembering true things. Love wasn't weak or soft or sentimental. It was the strongest force in existence. And God, real God, actual divine consciousness, wasn't some distant judge in the sky. It was here, now, in him, in everything, always had been. He'd just forgotten. Everyone had forgotten. Until beings like this Gray traveled across galaxies to hand them a book made of light and say, "Remember, it's time to remember." Samuel knelt in the Arizona desert, watching Jesus' light fade back into the book, and for the first time in years, he felt whole. The Gray's presence shifted, from witness to teacher. The book still hovered between them, pulsing softly. But now the being spoke with new intention, explaining, clarifying, making sure Samuel understood what he'd just seen. Faith is not blind belief, the voice came clearly. Faith is frequency, a vibration, a state of being that aligns with truth. Samuel's mind struggled to process. His whole life, faith had meant believing without proof, accepting on trust, hoping despite doubt. But this was different. This was science. Love is technology, the Gray continued. The most advanced technology in existence. It shapes reality, literally, physically, measurably. The book responded to the words. Images formed in the light. Samuel saw human cells, microscopic, beautiful, complex, and he watched them respond to vibrations. When frequencies of fear, anger, or despair touched them, the cells contracted, became chaotic, lost their natural harmony. But when frequencies of love touched them, pure, unconditional love, the cells organized, brightened, moved into perfect coherence. It wasn't metaphor. It was observable fact. Thought generates form, the being explained. Consciousness creates matter. Your scientists are beginning to discover this. Quantum physics, observer effect. But Jesus knew it 2,000 years ago. Samuel saw it playing out in the book's light. Thought creating ripples in the quantum field. Those ripples collapsing into probability. Probability becoming reality. Every thought, every emotion, every belief, creating, constantly creating. Dense emotions distort your field, the Gray said, showing Samuel his own energy signature. It looked muddy, heavy, constricted. Years of grief and numbness had literally changed the shape of the energy around him. Love reorganizes everything into harmony. The image shifted, showed what Samuel's field could look like. Bright, expansive, clear, coherent. Not because love is nice, because love is the fundamental organizing principle of the universe, the force that brings order from chaos, coherence from confusion. Jesus taught this science simply, the being continued. Love your neighbor, love your enemy, love yourself, not moral commands, operational instructions. Samuel's breath came fast. His entire understanding of religion was reorganizing. Jesus wasn't teaching rules. He was teaching physics, consciousness physics, reality engineering. When he said love your enemies, he wasn't demanding impossible forgiveness. He was explaining how to maintain high frequency despite external conditions, how to stay coherent when chaos surrounds you. When he said, ask and you shall receive, he wasn't promising wish fulfillment. He was describing manifestation mechanics, how focused intention plus emotional alignment creates reality. When he healed the sick, he wasn't performing miracles. He was demonstrating what becomes possible when someone operates from pure love frequency. Your species turned practice into dogma, the Gray said, and Samuel heard sadness in the telepathic tone. What Jesus lived as science, humans codified as religion. What he demonstrated as accessible became divine mystery that only he could do. The truth hit Samuel like physical impact. Churches had lost it, the actual knowledge, the vibrational science. They kept the stories but lost the instructions, kept the symbol but forgot the substance. Prayer became begging instead of alignment. Faith became belief instead of frequency. Love became sentiment instead of technology. The universe responds to your internal state, the being showed him. Not your words, not your rituals, your actual vibration. Samuel saw it clearly now. His own life. Years of vibrating at the frequency of loss, of abandonment, of meaninglessness. And the universe, being a perfect mirror, reflected that back to him. More loss, more isolation, more meaninglessness. Not punishment, just physics, resonance, like tuning forks responding to each other. He'd been broadcasting grief and receiving more reasons to grieve. How do I change it? Samuel asked aloud, his first spoken word since the vision of Jesus. The Gray moved closer. Those enormous eyes held something like compassion. Tune your heart. The being placed one hand near Samuel's chest, not touching, just hovering. Samuel felt warmth, energy, gentle but powerful. Breathe, the voice instructed. Conscious breath, the bridge between body and spirit, between matter and consciousness. Samuel breathed, deep, slow, focusing on the sensation of air moving in and out. Feel gratitude, the Gray continued, not for things, for existence itself, for being, for awareness. Samuel tried. At first, nothing. His mind resisted. What did he have to be grateful for? But he pushed through, found something small, the stars above, the cool air, the fact that he was here, witnessing the impossible. A tiny spark of genuine gratitude flickered in his chest, and the moment it did, the light around him responded. The ambient glow from the craft, from the book, from the being itself, it all pulsed. Once, in perfect sync with his heartbeat. There, the Gray said softly, you're beginning to tune. Samuel felt it, a lightness in his chest, subtle, but real, like someone had lifted a weight he'd been carrying so long he'd forgotten it was there. He breathed again, deeper, found more gratitude for this moment, this teaching, this impossible night that was showing him truth he'd never imagined. The light pulsed again, brighter this time, matching his rhythm, his heart, the light, the universe, all syncing up. For years Samuel had felt separate, alone, disconnected from everything. But now, breathing in the Arizona desert with an alien being and a book made of living light, he felt it. The connection, the resonance, the truth that had always been there. He wasn't separate from the universe. He was part of it. His vibration mattered. His state of being mattered. His love mattered. Not in some distant metaphorical way, in actual, measurable, physical reality. Jesus knew this, the Gray said, mastered this, lived this, and tried to teach it. Samuel nodded, tears streaming down his face. Not sad tears, released tears, understanding tears. His body felt lighter, like years of accumulated heaviness were evaporating, dissolving in the presence of pure truth. The Gray stepped back, the lesson complete, but the transformation just beginning. Samuel sat there breathing, feeling, tuning, aligning his internal state with frequencies he'd forgotten existed. Love, gratitude, wonder, presence, peace, not emotions, technologies, actual forces that shaped reality. And for the first time in years, Samuel Broderick vibrated at a frequency that felt like home. The Gray moved to the book again, touched its surface gently. The images changed, expanded, pulled back to show something larger. Earth, the planet, floating in black space, beautiful, fragile, alive, but not empty. Samuel could see energy around it, through it, the collective field of all life, all consciousness, all thoughts and emotions from billions of beings, and it was chaotic. Dark patches spread across the surface like bruises, zones of conflict, war, hatred, fear, places where humans vibrated at such low frequencies that the energy itself looked sick. Middle East, dark. Central Africa, dark. Pockets in Asia, Europe, the Americas. Dark spots where violence and suffering had created energetic wounds in the planet's field. Samuel felt sick looking at it. The cumulative pain, the collective trauma. But then he saw something else. Bright spots, points of intense light scattered across the globe. Not as numerous as the dark zones, but brilliant, powerful. Gestures of love, the Gray explained. Acts of genuine compassion, moments of authentic connection. They shine. Samuel watched a bright point pulse in what looked like India. Someone helping someone choosing love despite circumstances, and the light from that single act radiated outward, touching others, inspiring, creating ripples. Another flash in South America, another in Europe, scattered everywhere. Individual humans making individual choices to love, to help, to connect, and each one created light strong enough to be seen from space. The book responded to the images. Its colors shifted. Dark blues for the conflict zones, brilliant golds for the love. Your species stands at a threshold, the Gray said. Samuel heard gravity in the telepathic voice. Importance, urgency. The image of Earth shifted, showed potential futures, not fixed, fluid, dependent on choices not yet made. One timeline showed the dark zones spreading, consuming, humanity descending further into separation and fear and violence. Another showed the bright points multiplying, connecting, creating networks of light that transformed the entire planetary field. Between forgetting and awakening, the Gray said, "This is where you are. This is the moment." Samuel's heart pounded. The weight of it, the significance, not just his personal awakening, the species, the whole species teetering between collapse and evolution. "You have forgotten who you are," the being continued. "Forgotten your nature, your origin, your purpose." Images flowed from the book. Humans in their original state, before trauma, before separation, before they learned to fear and hate and divide. Beings of light, conscious, connected, aware of their divine nature. Every human carries the same light, the Gray explained. The same source, the same potential. Jesus had it. Buddha had it. Every master had it. But so do you. So does everyone. The truth settled into Samuel's bones. Not metaphor, not religious platitude, literal fact. He wasn't fundamentally different from Jesus, just operating at a different frequency, living with different awareness, but the same essential nature, the same divine spark. Life is not punishment, the voice said gently. Not a test, not a trial. It's an invitation to remember, to wake up, to recognize what you've always been. The image zoomed to the Arizona desert, to the station, to Samuel himself, before tonight, alone, isolated, dying inside. The desert, the Gray said. Your external circumstance mirroring your internal state. Empty, barren, lifeless. Samuel saw it clearly. He'd chosen this assignment, thought he was just running from pain, but on some level he'd been creating a perfect metaphor, a physical manifestation of his inner void. And this encounter, the image showed the craft landing, the Gray approaching. The moment of contact was not accident, not random. This was response. Response to what? Samuel wondered. To the void you carried, the being answered his unspoken question. The universe heard, felt, responded. You called out in your pain even without words, and we came. Tears blurred Samuel's vision. The universe had noticed, had cared, had sent help across impossible distances. He'd thought himself abandoned, forgotten, invisible, but he'd been seen all along. Your pain became soil, the Gray said, fertile ground, breaking you open so truth could take root. Suffering is not the goal, but it can be the doorway, if you let it. Samuel understood. The divorce, his father's death, the crushing loneliness. None of it was punishment. It was preparation, breaking down the false self so the true self could emerge. The universe doesn't waste anything. Even pain has purpose when you're willing to transform it. You were never alone, the being said, and the book pulsed with golden light. Never separate, never abandoned. You only believed you were, and that belief created your reality. The image showed Earth again, showed Samuel's bright point igniting, small but growing, his awakening creating ripples, his transformation touching others, not because he'd become special, because he'd remembered what he always was. This is your purpose, the gray said, not to preach, not to convert, not to build new religions, simply to remember, to embody, to be the love you've learned tonight. Samuel nodded, understanding flooding through him. He didn't need to do anything dramatic, didn't need to start a movement or write a book or become a guru. He just needed to live differently, vibrate differently, love differently, be the light, let others see it's possible, let the frequency spread naturally. The revelation filled his silence, the void he'd carried for years. It wasn't empty anymore. It was full, completely full, of truth, of purpose, of connection, of love. The gray stepped back, the teaching complete, and Samuel sat in the Arizona desert, forever changed, no longer a broken maintenance worker hiding from life, but a being of light, remembering, awakening, coming home. The visions opened something Samuel had locked away for years. Emotions poured out, not gentle, violent, like a dam breaking. His father's face appeared in his mind, the hospital room, the morphine haze, their last conversation, awkward, incomplete, full of things unsaid. "I'm proud of you, son." Samuel had nodded. Said, "I know," but he didn't know. Not really. His father had never been good with emotions, never said things directly, and Samuel had inherited that same inability. The grief hit him fresh, raw, like it had just happened. He'd never properly mourned, just buried it, kept moving, told himself he was fine, but the wound was still open, still bleeding. Then the divorce, his wife's face in those final months, not angry, disappointed, resigned. "You're not here anymore, Samuel. I can't reach you." She'd been right. He'd checked out emotionally long before she filed papers, used work as excuse, used grief as shield, used numbness as protection. The shame cut deep. Years of emotional cowardice, years of running, years of hiding behind routines and silence. He'd made it impossible to love him. "You thought you were worthless." The gray's voice came gently, but that was never truth. That was defense. Samuel saw it now. The apathy hadn't been his natural state. It had been armor, protection against unbearable pain. If nothing mattered, then losing things couldn't hurt. But that armor had become prison, protecting him from pain, but also from joy, from connection, from life itself. The being showed him images from the book, his own thought patterns, years of negative loops. "I'm not good enough. Nothing I do matters. I don't deserve happiness." Those thoughts had shaped his reality, created it, manifested it, not because they were true, because he'd believed them completely. Samuel felt shame wash over him. Years wasted, years of self-inflicted suffering. But then the gray's presence shifted, moved closer. Compassion, pure, unconditional, without judgment. "You did the best you could with what you knew," the voice said. "You survived the only way you understood. There is no shame in that." The words unlocked something. Samuel's chest heaved. A sob broke free, then another. He was weeping, really weeping. For the first time since his father's funeral, he cried for his father, for his marriage, for the years spent hiding, for the ghost he'd become, but also for the boy he'd been, the one who still believed in magic, who still trusted the world. The light from the book wrapped around him, warm, gentle. It touched his chest, his heart, and something shifted. The grief didn't disappear, but it transformed, from festering wound to one that could finally heal. "Pain opens space," the gray said softly. "Breaks you open so truth can enter. You have walked through it." Samuel looked at his past with new eyes, not with shame, not with regret, with understanding. His father's death had broken something. The divorce had broken something else. The isolation had broken what remained. But maybe that breaking had been necessary. Maybe he'd needed to shatter completely before rebuilding into something true. Every moment had led here, to this desert, to this night, to this impossible encounter. The old Samuel, the ghost, the one who believed in nothing, the one who'd given up, was dying. Not violently, just quietly letting go, dissolving in the light of truth. And in its place, something new emerged, something that remembered, something that could feel again without fear. "You are not who you thought you were," the gray said. "You were always light, always consciousness, always connected. You only forgot." Samuel nodded, tears still streaming, but lighter now, cleaner. The old hymn was falling away, the lies, the defenses, the false self built from pain, and underneath, something eternal, something that had been waiting patiently. The gray placed a hand near Samuel's chest, energy flowing between them. "Welcome back," the voice said. "You have been gone a long time, but now you are home." Samuel felt it, really felt it. For the first time in years, maybe ever, he felt like he was exactly where he belonged. The old Samuel was dead, gone, dissolved in desert night and alien wisdom. What remained was something truer, something that had always been there, just waiting for this moment, this breaking, this rebirth. The gray stayed close, teaching, guiding, showing Samuel how to maintain what he'd experienced. "Listen to your heart," the voice said. "Not your thoughts. Your heart knows. It always knows." Samuel closed his eyes, focused inward, past the mental chatter, past the doubt, deeper, to the quiet space in his chest. And there it was, a pulse, steady, certain, alive. His heart had been speaking his whole life. He'd just been too busy thinking to listen. "Feel the field around you," the gray instructed. "The energy, the consciousness that permeates everything." Samuel expanded his awareness. At first, nothing. Then, something. A subtle sense of being held, surrounded. The space around him wasn't empty. It was full, alive, intelligent. "Breathe into it." Samuel breathed. Deep, slow. With each breath he felt more connected, more present, more real. His breath became prayer, not words, not requests, just conscious presence. Gratitude for existence itself. Gratitude, the gray said. The highest frequency. It acknowledges what is, and in that acceptance, creates space for more. Samuel felt it replacing the old feeling, that sense of abandonment, of being forgotten by God. It had been a lie. God had never left. The divine had never abandoned him. Because God wasn't external, wasn't somewhere else, wasn't a distant judge in the sky. God was here, now, in him, in his cells, in his breath. "The divine is not separate," the gray confirmed. "Your religions built that separation, made God into something outside of you that you had to earn." The book pulsed with bright light. "But consciousness is God," the voice continued. "Love is God. The awareness experiencing this moment, that is God experiencing itself through you." Samuel's entire understanding reorganized. Not a being to worship, a reality to embody. Not something out there, something right here. Every cell carried it. Divine intelligence, creative power, the same force that formed galaxies and grew trees. He'd been carrying God inside him his entire life, and he'd felt abandoned. The irony was almost funny. Peace settled into Samuel's chest. Real peace. Not numbness, not absence of feeling, but presence. Deep, unshakable presence. The emptiness he'd carried for years filled, not with things, not with accomplishments, with knowing. Simple, certain knowing, that he was okay, that he'd always been okay. The vision of Jesus appeared again in the book's light, softer now, smiling. Not the suffering Christ, not the distant Savior, just a being who'd understood, who'd mastered, who'd shown what was possible. And that smile said, "You get it now. Love is the root of all creation," the gray said. Not sentiment, not emotion. Love as force, love as frequency, love as the organizing principle of existence. Everything came from love, returned to love, was made of love. Samuel opened his eyes, looked at the desert around him, the rocks, the sand, the sky. It looked different, less barren, less hostile. The desert wasn't empty. It was full, full of presence, full of life, full of divine consciousness expressing itself. Even the station looked different now. Not prison, temple, the place where he'd learned the most important lesson of his life. The silence wasn't absence anymore. It was presence, pure presence. the sound of existence itself. You are part of the light, the gray said. Not metaphorically, literally. You are consciousness expressing itself in this form, in this time. You always have been. Samuel accepted it, fully, completely. Not belief knowing, cellular knowing. He was light, had always been light, would always be light, even when he'd forgotten. Even when he'd felt broken and worthless and lost. The truth hadn't changed, only his awareness of it. And now that awareness was back. Samuel Broderick sat in the Arizona desert under impossible stars and felt himself reborn, not into a new person, into his true person, the one he'd always been underneath the pain, the one who remembered, who knew, who loved. He'd spent 48 years preparing for this moment, every joy, every sorrow, all of it leading here, to this awakening, this return. Where he'd thought himself most lost, he'd found himself most completely. Where he'd thought himself abandoned by God, he'd discovered God living inside him. The gray watched, patient, satisfied, and Samuel smiled, actually smiled, for the first time and longer than he could remember, because he understood now. He was home, had always been home, because home wasn't a place, it was a state of being, and that state was love. The craft completed its restructuring. Samuel watched as the final pulses of bioluminescent energy stabilized. The hull glowed with healthy blues and purples, strong, whole, ready. The gray turned to him. Those enormous black eyes held something Samuel now recognized as gratitude, but also farewell. The being was preparing to leave. Samuel felt it, a shift in the air, in the energy between them, and something unexpected hit him. Sadness, loss, like saying goodbye to a friend he'd known his entire life, which was strange. They'd met only hours ago, but it felt like lifetimes, like this being had shown him more truth in one night than he'd found in 48 years. The gray stepped closer, placed one hand near Samuel's head, not touching, hovering. The telepathic connection deepened, became more intimate, more personal. You remember by helping, the voice said. You awaken by loving. This is the way, the only way. Samuel felt the words settle into his bones. Not instructions, truth. The kind you recognize because you've always known it. Help others. Love openly. That's how the awakening spreads. That's how the light grows. Your life will never be the same, the gray continued. You know this. Feel this. Accept this. Samuel nodded, tears forming again, but different tears now. Not grief, not pain. Gratitude. Pure gratitude for this impossible gift. The being stepped back, toward the craft. The opening appeared in the hull, seamless, organic, alive. Samuel wanted to say something. Thank you. Don't go. How do I do this alone? But the gray already knew. The connection between them carried everything unsaid. You are never alone, the voice reminded him. You know this now. Don't forget again. Then the being entered the craft. The opening sealed. The bioluminescence intensified. Samuel stepped back. Instinct, giving space. The craft lifted. No sound, no exhaust. Just rising. Graceful. Impossible. Beautiful. It hovered for a moment. Pulsing. Like a heartbeat. Like goodbye. Then it shot upward. Silent. Fast. Gone. Samuel stood in the clearing. Alone again. But not alone. Not like before. The air felt different. Lighter. Charged with meaning, with purpose, with presence. He turned back toward the station, started walking, and noticed his steps felt different, firmer, more grounded, more certain. Something in him had changed, fundamentally, permanently. His heart pulsed differently, not faster, deeper, like it was beating in rhythm with something larger, something cosmic. As he approached the station, the lights flickered, once, twice, then blazed to life. Power restored, everything functioning again, like the universe itself was confirming, yes, you're back. Welcome home. Samuel entered his quarters, sat at his small desk, grabbed a notebook, and wrote. Everything, every detail, every word, every vision, every feeling. He wrote for hours, his hand cramping, but he couldn't stop. Had to capture it, had to preserve it, not just for himself, for anyone who might need to know. That this happened, that it's real, that help comes from impossible places when you're ready to receive it. The desert outside his window looked different in the pre-dawn light. Not barren, not hostile, not empty, sacred. The clearing where the craft had landed, the rocks that had witnessed, the sky that had opened. This wasn't a wasteland anymore. It was the site of his awakening, his rebirth, his return to truth. The routine maintenance work he'd do later that day, checking equipment, logging readings, replacing cables, it would all be different now. Not because the work changed, because he changed. Each task became prayer. Each moment became meditation. Each breath became gratitude. He wasn't just fixing machines anymore. He was maintaining presence, practicing consciousness, living the truth he'd been shown. Small gestures, simple acts, nothing dramatic or showy, just being present. Being kind, being love, in whatever form the day required. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. The encounter never faded, never became dream or delusion. It stayed vivid, real, present, a constant reminder of what he knew now, what he'd always known but forgotten. Samuel carried the vibration of that night in his cells, in his breath, in his awareness, and slowly, subtly, his entire life reorganized around that truth. He reached out to his ex-wife, not to get back together, just to apologize, to acknowledge, to release the weight they'd both been carrying. She cried on the phone, said she'd felt the shift, said he sounded different, said she was glad he'd found peace. He visited his father's grave, spoke to him, really spoke, said all the things he'd been too scared to say when he was alive, and felt his father's presence, not gone, not distant, just transformed, still there, still proud, still loving. The emptiness that had consumed him for years, gone, replaced by fullness, by purpose, by connection to everything. He wasn't hiding in the desert anymore. He was serving, being present, holding frequency, radiating what he'd been shown, and people noticed. The supply driver who came monthly started staying longer, asking questions, sharing struggles. Samuel listened, shared what he could, helped where possible, loved without condition. The vibration spread, quietly, naturally. The way light spreads, not by forcing, just by being. Samuel Broderick had been a broken man maintaining machines in a desert. Now he was a conscious being maintaining presence in the temple the universe had prepared for him. The work looked the same from outside, but inside, everything had changed. He'd come back to life, really back, for the first time ever, and he carried that desert night with him, always, forever. The proof that help is real, that awakening is possible, that love is the answer to every question. Samuel finally understood. The emptiness he'd carried for years, it was never God's absence. It was his own, distance from himself, from his truth, from the light he'd always been. God had been right there the whole time, in every breath, every heartbeat, every moment. He'd just been looking in the wrong direction, searching externally for something that only existed internally. The encounter showed him what he couldn't see alone. That every life, every single consciousness is a fragment of the same source, the same light, the same love, not separate, never separate, just experiencing itself through infinite forms. Jesus wasn't a distant savior anymore, not a historical figure frozen in religious paintings. He was presence, internal presence, a frequency Samuel could access by choosing love, by choosing truth, by choosing to remember. The ancestral book had revealed what churches had hidden, what scriptures had obscured, what institutions had controlled. The origin, the common source, the truth that all souls come from the same light and return to the same light. We're not sinners needing salvation. We're consciousness temporarily forgetting itself, and life is the invitation to remember. The gray had departed physically, but the message remained, embedded in Samuel's cells, woven into his awareness. Love isn't theory. Love is compass. Love is the force that guides, that heals, that creates, that transforms. Faith returned, but different now. Not hopeful wishing, not fragile belief requiring constant reinforcement. Certainty, knowing, the kind that doesn't need proof because it is proof. Samuel's internal desert bloomed, the barren landscape of his consciousness suddenly fertile, alive, growing things he'd thought were dead. Joy, wonder, curiosity, trust, connection, hope, all of it returning like spring after endless winter. And the universe responded. Because it always responds, always mirrors, always reflects what you broadcast. Opportunities appeared, connections formed, synchronicities multiplied. Not because he was special, because he was awake, because he was aligned, because he was vibrating at the frequency of truth. He realized something profound. Helping others wasn't separate from spiritual practice. Helping was spiritual practice. Every act of service, every moment of compassion, every gesture of kindness, prayer in action, love made manifest. The dishes he washed, the equipment he maintained, the conversations he held, all of it sacred when done with presence, when done with love. Life gained new meaning, not the grand dramatic meaning he'd once searched for. Quiet meaning, deep meaning, the meaning found in watching sunrise, in feeling gratitude, in being present with whatever is. Samuel never felt invisible again, not to the universe, not to himself, not to the divine consciousness permeating everything. He saw it clearly now. Everyone walking around carrying light, most of them unaware, most of them asleep, most of them suffering from the same forgetting he'd suffered from, but all of them, every single one, light in temporary amnesia, God experiencing itself through billions of unique perspectives. And his role wasn't to preach, wasn't to convert, wasn't to convince, just to be, to remember, to radiate, to let others see it's possible. The transformation he'd undergone wasn't special. It was available to everyone, always. You just had to be broken open enough to let truth in, desperate enough to receive help, ready enough to remember. Samuel understood the final piece, the ultimate truth the Gray had shown him. Divine reconnection wasn't something you achieve. It was something you remember. You were never disconnected, never separated, never abandoned. You only believed you were. And that belief created the experience of separation. But the truth? You are love, have always been love, will always be love. Temporarily wearing a human form, temporarily experiencing limitation, temporarily forgetting your nature, but never actually separate from source, never actually alone, never actually lost. The reconciliation begins the moment you remember, the moment you stop searching outside, the moment you recognize the divine already living inside you. Samuel sat on the steps of his station, December 2017 ending, a new year beginning. Above him, stars, billions of them, ancient light from distant suns. But now when he looked up, he didn't feel small, didn't feel insignificant, didn't feel alone. He felt connected, part of it. The same consciousness that formed those stars formed him. The same love that moved galaxies moved through his cells. He smiled, breathed, felt the desert air, the cool night, the infinite presence, and knew with complete certainty that he was home, had always been home, would always be home, because home isn't a place you go, it's a truth you remember. And Samuel Broderick, broken maintenance worker turned awakened being, had finally remembered. The Gray was gone, the craft was gone, the living book was gone, but the truth remained. Love is the answer. Consciousness is eternal. Separation is illusion, and we're all just light temporarily forgetting itself. Invited, always invited, to remember. Samuel remembered, and in remembering, reconnected to the divine that had never left. The journey was complete. The circle closed. The awakening achieved. Not because something was added, because something was removed. The forgetting, the lies, the fear, and what remained? Pure, simple, eternal, love.